Hi guys, I'm today happy to present to you the ELZ1, an outstanding mobile synthesizer from the Japanese synthesizer manufacturing alternative company called Sonicware. It's often compared to the OP1 from Teenage Engineering, but briefly it's only having simple facts in common. They are both mobile synthesizers, meaning they need no plug from the wall, they have batteries, and they both have a speaker, but that's it. While the ELZ1 is having a sequencer, the OP1 is having a tape. The ELZ1 is having 7 outstanding sound engine, including a lot of 8-bit stuff like typical chiptune sounds and MSX-like sounds, but also having frequency modulation, wavetable synthesis, and granular synthesis, also the sand flute and some other ones, and great effects. So I'm gonna show you now all the features of this wonderful device. So before I dive into all the features and the engines, I first of all want to show you the build quality. It's really a stable device, and when you look at it, it's having a 3-octave keyboard. All the controllers are quite logically built up. You instantly see what is meant. There's the engine, there's the envelope, the filter, the effects and master device, and arpeggiator sequencer. On the right side you have the memory block, so you can step through the patches and also save there. You can tap your tempo. You have a menu which instantly shows you all the features what you need to know about MIDI synchronization and so on. If you look on the backside of the device, you see an extra volume for headphones, meaning this is a good option in certain situations where you need a own monitor, but of course also like when you are working on a mobile basis and having not your studio. You have the line outs here with a separate volume. You have an aux in, meaning you can use it as an, I would say, little internal mixing desk if you have some other mobile devices, and when you're normally like somewhere off-road doing your music, you normally don't have a mixing desk, so this helps a lot. And the aux-in also is used for the sampling, for the grains, and also you can use it for trigger synchronization like with a Volca or pocket operator. And then you also have a USB port which contains of course all features with USB MIDI being a MIDI host and being a MIDI slave, so all these options are available. I will show it later to you, but also you need the USB port to export your audio files or your patches, or making just simply a backup or having a new firmware. So far it's really robust design. On the back side you have here the batteries, and it's quite stable build, so I will now on my next tour in the United States try out this device and I will see how stable it is really, but at the first sight it's extremely well built. I first of all gonna show you a few patches that you know what I'm talking about. So here's a classical wavetable sounds like from old Waldorf machines, PBG and so on. You have classical FM synthesis like on a DX7 or DX100. You have granular synthesis. You have the sand flute. That is an awesome instrument and engine. I will show you later. It's a great synthesizer. It's a wavetable. And of course granular. Another FM sound. noise. Also awesome sound engine for organic layer sounds. So much about a first look into the sounds. Of course, you will see more when we go into the engines. First of all, I am gonna show you the features of those parts of the instruments which are the same for all the different engines. The engines are really different in programming, but there is some parts which are the same, and it's these four features of these four knobs. It's the envelope, it's the filter, it is the master and effects and arpeggiator, and when you press it longer, it's the sequencer. You press again longer, and it's again the arpeggiator. Then you have the memory block to go through all the presets with plus minus. You can save here straight with enter. You can tap the tempo, and when you're in the normal performance mode, then with the arrows up and down, you do transposing octave wise. Really easy to handle. So first of all, we look into the envelope, the so-called VCA, but here we call it just envelope. You press just this function for the envelope. You have here the LED flashing, and then you can go with the type through the different types of envelopes. We have at the moment 4 envelopes, a classical ADSR. There you have all the 4 parameters on the display, which are then controlled by these 4 encoders. It's quite simple and self-explaining. And here we only have 1 level of menu for the envelope. But of course, there is different envelopes. We use the second one, which is then having extra a curve, meaning it could be more exponential or more logarithmic instead of being only linear, the ADSR. And there you instantly see you have more menu features, and now you can switch through the menus with the button itself. And the curved one just simply looks like this. I show it to you with the attack now. I make a really long attack and use one exponential. And when I have it more logarithmically, then it comes in much more fast. So I can decide how I want to have it when I don't want to have it only linear in the raising, and also of course for the release and for the decay. Then we have a ADSRA envelope, which gives you an extra possibility for the release when you press shorter the sustain. And you have finally the same with a ADSRA envelope with the curved mode. So much about the envelopes. Now let's go to the filter section. The filter is right now sleeping, as you can see, but there is various filter models. First of all, a classical 6 dB low pass filter. I can adjust the frequency, and I have a pre-gain which helps me to first of all avoid distortions. Just note, it's a 8-bit instrument, meaning it distorts much faster than, for example, a 16-bit instrument, especially when you press a lot of keys at the same time, like all the 6 notes. It can more easy start to distort. And with the pre-gain, you can avoid this, or also, of course, you can fuck up your filter and make it distort. If you like that, wonderful feature. Of course, you can now modulate your filter, and this is the same for all the different filter types. So I show it to you one time. You go into the modular type. You can use a LFO to modulate with a certain frequency and a wave shape. You have like classical sine, square, triangle, sawtooth, and reversed sawtooth, and random. And then you can find a destination which you want to modulate. In this case, we have now only the frequency. On the other filter types, you can also modulate other parts. I show it later then to you with a classical envelope, which is also available by just choosing here envelope. Okay, let's go to the next filter type. It's a 12 dB with a Q factor. At the moment you can hear the steps between the different frequencies, but when you use a modulation, for example with a LFO, you will not hear it anymore, because then it is smooth in the transition itself. Let's have it on frequency and a full depth. You can hear how it's smooth, raising up. Next filter type is a classical high-pass filter, 6 dB, then having a high-pass filter 12 dB with Q factor. Then you have a band-pass filter, which is working a little bit like a classical parametric with a bandwidth. Also here you have the pre-gain. You can use it like to have less distortion or more even. And you can modulate it. Now we try out our envelope. I assign it to my frequency and I have no delay. I can invert it, but at the moment I use it straightforward with a long attack, a long decay, back to 0. So, and now let's adjust here the frequency. Here you can see the envelope, which is separate from the volume envelope, from the VCA. So you have two envelopes, one for the filter, one for the volume. And the next is a graphic filter. You have various ones here. This is more like a parametric filter, so the term graphic might be a little bit wrong because this is classical parametric. But anyhow, we call it now here graphic filter. Then you have various shelving filters, and you also have, of course, a notch filter. All these filters are fully able to be modulated with your LFO and with your envelope. The LFO at the moment is on a free run mode, meaning you cannot trigger it with a key. I hope this is a feature which will come in the future. So next we go into the effects. The effects are serial, meaning one after another. You cannot change the order how they are arranged, but actually it's really fine. And I have to say, when I compare these internal effects, for example, to the internal effects of the OP1 or the OPZ, they are on a much higher quality. Of course, they are not like a studio quality because they are for a 8-bit device, but they are really well done. And I think for a synthesizer, and especially for this type of synthesizer, they actually offer exactly what you need. So first of all, you have a drive part. There you can decide to have some distortion, overdrive or fuzz. Then you have a chorus, vibrato with a lot of course, parameters. We don't go into all of them. The phaser, tremolo, flanger, ring modulator. Which helps you really to fuck up your signal. Then you have the next level. You press again on the key for master and effects, and you have another modulation which you choose with the type button. You have, for example, a stereo chorus, which is extremely broad. You can instantly hear. Unfortunately, it's having a big phase of 180 degree inside, what makes it a little bit problematic with the mono compatibility, but if you don't care about that, it's perfectly fine, because it's always outstanding from your whole mix, because it's more like a behind your ears location on the stereo field. Would be nice in the future to have a possibility to sweep through the phase. That gives you then an option like in old psychoacoustic exciters like the Höfex or the SPL spatial dimension equalizers and exciters. You also have other features like phaser and vibrato and tremolo and also auto pan, what is also a nice feature. We have it now a little bit deeper with slower rate. Then we have a delay. This delay is of course syncable to the BPM which you tapped in, but also of course to the BPM which comes from a clock or a trigger. This I'm going to show you a little bit later on this tutorial. So you have a feedback rate and a mix, and you have of course various types of delays like a tape echo, but also you have a reverse echo which is quite nice. Don't put it like so loud in the mix, and a little bit slower. So, and finally we look into the reverbs. So we have a classical room reverb, we have a classical hull, we have a plate, there's of course not so many parameters. On the next one there is more. You have at least a pre-delay, possibility to set up decay, and the high frequency damp of the reverb, and a mix button, and finally you have arena, which is like an endless reverb. Would be really nice in the future, perhaps even having a real endless reverb. Okay, on the next level, as you can see, that goes further down the menus. We have all the master functions for this patch, meaning the memory level. It makes really sense to have different levels here for different patches, because the engines are of course extremely different in levels. Sometimes FM might be really explosive and loud, and also granular can be really loud, and also when you tweak up the filters and you want to distort them, then you can put down here the level, or also gain it up, like to have it perfectly with all your other patches. On the next level you have the voice mode, so you can decide if it's polyphonic, if it's mono, or if it's legato. You also have a glide rate then, so you can do classical portamentos. You can of course decide here the priority, if it's the last, the first, the highest or the lowest. So much about this. And finally you have a tune, so you can give each patch, and especially when you work with grains, it might be sometimes that they are a little bit out of tune, so you have a fine tuning on this button. Next we go to the arpeggiator. The arpeggiator is first of all off, but you switch it on with the type, and there you have various types of arpeggiators, upward, downward, and going up and down, down and up, and all kind of different ways. Also you have a random version where you have a possibility to have them randomly played from the order. When you press the OK button, you latch it, meaning they are hold. When you press it again, it stops again. You have, I now use a different sound. So you have also a play order, so not only random. Let's make it a little bit faster, the sound. You have a play order function, meaning in the order how you played it first, the arpeggiator will run. As another feature, you have a gate function which defines the sustain of the played note to make it more legato or to have it more short. Of course you can sync it to the BPM with various notes like dotted notes like triolic notes and so on. Quarters, eighth, 16th and so on, and the BPM manually here. When you have external synchronization, it will change here. I show you later. When you press longer on the button, you go straight into the sequencer. And the sequencer is a quite new feature on the new firmware. You can first of all choose your pattern. Each pattern can have a different length, from like 1 step up to 64 steps. We use now a classical 16 step. You go simply into record mode by just pressing record, and then you have two ways. Either you engage OK and it runs with click. Of course, you have to put on your metronome. Yes, like this. You can always tap your tempo newly, and then you just can record your notes. Or you have also the possibility to record step by step. So let's go into this mode, auto step, that the step goes forward. You can go to the one, here we are. So that's it. So we have it, we can have a listen to it. Wonderful. So we stored it now to this pattern. It's in this case pattern 15. We now go into the next pattern, number 16, and do again a record. So it is, it's 64 long. We change it into 16 so that it's having the same length. So perfect. Okay, wonderful. We store it into number 16. So we have a pattern number 15 and 16. If you now want to have them arranged in a song mode, you just go to pattern chain, switch it on, and decide as start pattern number 15 and as end pattern number 16. And now it's running in this order. I switch off the click, it nerves the metronome. Really easy, you can now tweak your sound. And as we're in the middle of this, I'm gonna show you now the synchronization. And you have various possibilities to synchronize. For example, you use something like a pocket operator. I have here one. You just connect it to the aux in. You go into the master mode and you start it, and you already can hear on one side the click. Now you go into menu. It's a little bit loud. Let's have it more decent volume. So you go to sequencer, you go to clock, and you tell to the device sync. You also could use MIDI clock. I show you that later. And now instantly it erases from the audio mixing the one channel and puts the main sound into the mix, and we are already ready for synchronizing. So, when I now start the sequencer, it waits for the trigger signal. So a really easy and extremely functional way to synchronize together. Unfortunately, at the moment, you only can chain up many patterns in a strict order from first number to last number. Meaning you cannot, for example, tell like I want to have 2 times pattern 1, 3 times pattern 3, and then go to pattern number 17 or whatever. But what I can do, I can stay and rest while running the sequencer on one pattern. So that means I can easily put one part longer and the other shorter. I show to you. So we go back and synchronize. It's in play mode and we start. So now it's changing to the next pattern and changing again to the first pattern and to the second. When I want to stay now on the first pattern, I switch off pattern chain and it stays here as long as I want. And then I do a change again, and I can also stay on this pattern no longer by putting off. And I can go again into the first one. And this at least gives you opportunity to a little bit control your sequencer. Next I show you the synchronization with MIDI through USB. So then I connect here, for example, this OPC, which I already have, with my USB, put the USB into the ELZ1. And now it's only a few steps. I check my setting on the USB MIDI, which is here under MIDI, USB MIDI. I can of course decide a receive channel. I take number 14, it's already set it, because this is the general channel on the OPC for sending outside MIDI information. And then I go into USB MIDI and I press the device mode. The host mode I need, for example, if I want to just put a standard USB MIDI interface to have normal MIDI in and MIDI out for this device, but in the slave mode I use the MIDI device mode, so it's now listening most likely to the OPC. I tried channel number 14 and I can see it's working. And I switch on this channel and now it's running from the OPC. If I want that also the sequencer runs with it, I check here my sequencer settings and go from the sync clock into MIDI clock, and then it's working. It runs instantly. It got directly a clock from the OPC. And now I switch off, of course, the MIDI information from channel 14 on the OPC. And now they are running together, synchronized to each other. And what's now a nice feature is that I can connect just my OPC, because the loudspeaker is inside of the OPC is worse than the one from the ELZ, and just connect it here. And now I can mix them together. Of course, to set the right level for the OPC, which was now distorted, I go into aux in gain and set it correctly, put it here to the max. Wonderful, works perfectly fine. Again, I can do my pattern changes and sometimes stay on one pattern by switching off pattern chain, and now having it again, keeping it on this pattern and again on the first. And of course I can also do here inside of this also extra recording of notes by record mode add or override or erase, taking away. And also I can use here the gate to make the notes longer. So much about synchronization. It is really easy with the ELZ1, and it makes it then really somehow a master equipment, which you can also use as your amplifier for your other mobile devices, as you have the audio in, and you easily can use it on a USB MIDI device mode. I switch all this off now that the sequencer runs smooth. I go back to clock internal and also to MIDI USB off. As a next feature, I will show you the engines of this wonderful synthesizer. I show you first of all the low bit oscillator. It's a group basically of 3 engines. We have the low bit oscillator, the standard oscillator, and the custom oscillator. There's little differences. So you have a standard, sine, triangle, square, and so on. And you have a so-called duty parameter, which I know like from a pulse modulation width. And of course this duty you can modulate, for example, with an envelope. I use the internal envelope of the oscillator and go to the duty and use the envelope here, go into maximum depth, put a slow attack, decade. And you instantly hear how the and of course works perfectly fine. I put down a little bit the level of this preset here because it's a little bit loud. The next one is the low bit oscillator, the first one. It also gives you the opportunity, besides the duty factor, to have the number of bits cutted away, which makes the sound then automatically much more like a chiptune low bit. So I have now a 2-bit, or I have a 8-bit, 4-bit, these opportunities I have. And of course I can also modulate that, for example, with an LFO. Go into bit depth and use a full rate here. The next one is the third oscillator. It's the custom oscillator, where I can put to each other different 2 oscillators, having, for example, a first one a square and a second a triangle or a sawtooth, and then I can have a period, meaning a balance of how much of those waveforms are put it next to each other. I have also again a duty parameter, and of course also here I have the opportunity to modulate with an envelope, also like the period. I put again the duty, and I can of course also try out the other parameters, some like pitch, the oscillators itself changing, the period, the duty. So much about this simple oscillators. With them you can really do the typical chiptune sounds. Next is a group of in this engine, a group of various wavetable. First of all, you can decide which one you use here, and you also can paint one by having here your wave memory, going through the position and of each band, and having then, so we go through it, different levels for each band. And you can instantly, of course, hear how it works. Unfortunately, at the moment on the wavetable engine, you only can modulate the pitch. This is a pity. I hope this will change in the future, because especially the wavetable needs a lot of modulation opportunities to have then the full possibilities of a classical wavetable synthesis. The next engine of it is the classical morphing between different waveforms. I can use my memorized ones, but I can also use those which are internally stored. Of course, you can put there your own ones. Then you have a time where you can put a length, how long the morphing takes. A nice feature. Also here would be nice to have some more modulation. On all engines you have one feature, it's called color. You can have here a classic setting or modern setting. Classic means most likely the raw sound with modulation noises from 8-bit, and a more clear modern sound with less modulation noises. Next engine is then the possibility to have on your wave memory from your wavetables frequency modulation with a ratio and a level. Also here it would be beautiful to have more modulation possibilities. I'm sure that this comes with the next firmware update. As next engine, I showed to you the DNA Explorer and the SiGrinder, so this group of granular synthesis. I plug some device with audio, put it to the right level. And first of all, go to the DNA Explorer and go into sampling. So I press OK. And now when I press again OK, it starts instantly to sample. So now we have a sample by pressing OK. I save it and go back into my SiGrinder or in my DNA Explorer, and now I can explore the sound quality of my sample, different grains here, and instantly you can see it makes sense that there is a gain because different parts are different loud of the sample. You have a dig parameter, which also includes the grains around your sample, and a harmony, which adds extra harmonics. Here you can hear the typical wavetable grainy sound. The good thing is you have the opportunity to record many different grains, and you can modulate them with LFO and envelope. For example, we use now a envelope and try it out with the explore parameter. So. And suddenly we can hear our sample even having a time stretched. But we also can, of course, automate other parameters. For example, the dig. So we automate a little bit faster, more intensive. At the moment it's only mono, we make it polyphonic, a little bit, still a little bit. And then when we like it, we press as always save and OK. Now we watch the next granular engine. It is the Psy grinder, which gives you even more opportunity on the sample. I can define there a start and a end point within the samples are taken. You have the possibility to use up-down positioning or having even a random positioning. Or the up-down positioning. With the time, I decide how fast it's running. And with the parameter resolution, I decide how many steps I use. If I only have one step, 2 steps or more within the time, 100 is the maximum. I have also a dig parameter. And a harmony parameter. And now I again use my modulation envelope going into dig parameter. Maximum here, raising up and going down. Of course, I can also automate all the other parameters, putting up the dig now and having now a assign resolution or to harmony, bit crusher, start point, end point. And together with filter, I can create their awesome sounds with the Psy grinder. So much about the granular engine. Next, we're gonna watch our FM synthesis. Let's have a preset here. This is the classical tubular bells, which is one of the most known sounds from the DX7, DX100 and so on. Famously from various Christmas songs, of course. We Are the World and much more. This frequency modulation engine is only featuring 4 operators. The principle is quite simple. In FM, you have a carrier and you have modulators. The carrier is the lowest oscillator. On top of them, there is the modulators, which are modulating on the carrier. The carrier is here red and the modulator green. All these oscillators, in this case these four, you call operators, and you have various possibilities to make the connections between the operators differently by choosing the algorithm. With this you create all the typical FM sounds. You have then for each of the operators their own ratio, meaning the multiplier on which frequency the base frequency is multiplied and then modulated. And the more it's odd numbers, the more weird the result gets. If you have full numbers, it's more harmonic. And you have a level and a feedback and a detune. Unfortunately, you don't have an envelope for each operator. You only have one envelope which goes only into pitch. I hope there will come in the future an update to give them more opportunity to having for separate operators separate envelopes. So much about this. One function is really nice. It's the gotcha, because FM is normally really complicated to program, so you can easily have direct random settings for all the parameters with the gotcha. So much about this engine. The next engine is then again two engines which are quite similar. It is the sand flute and mask noise. Mask noise means you have one noise. You can choose a source, a white noise or a pink noise, depending on what kind of bandwidth on your filter you want to have. And then you can mask it with one of the basic waves and having a mask level. And this, of course, you can also modulate then, assign it to mask level, to noise or whatever. And the same on the sand flute, a little bit different. It's more into the resonance of natural instruments like a flute. You decide first of all a filter type, like the bandpass. Then you can decide a width of this filter, and then you have various harmonics which you can add. Octave one, so this is an octave. Then we have another one. I put down the level of it. You have quints, and you even have a third, a fifth, and the third. The third interval and the fifth. And wonderful, you can again here modulate, putting an LFO and saying I want to just modulate this one band. And I can have the modulation for different bands. For the third, fifth octave, or for the whole bandwidth, or for all levels. And especially this engine gives you a lot of opportunities to create really lively and organic sounding layer types, but also of course leads for flute-like sounds. So much about the current engines of the actual firmware in the ELZ1. So far, I can say it is great as it's a small community. You can have always direct contact to the developer. It's Dr. Yu Endo, a great developer, and I would proudly call him a nerd because whenever you post something on the Facebook group, he is answering and trying to help, or like when you have some ideas, what could be next time established, he's looking into it. So it's a wonderful possibility to have a direct contact with the developer. This is something what I personally like a lot because it helps you to make your synthesizer much more personal, having the sound opportunities and possibilities which you want, having not so much like the typical standard sounds like from Roland, Korg, whatsoever synthesizer brand, which all sound quite the same. We as music makers, as electronic music makers, are always seeking for the opportunity to create real authentic and own sounds, and this ELZ1 is one of these devices. And to tell you so much, I mean, my device is carrying the number 172, so the group of owners is still, I think, not so huge, what gives you the possibility to have really a unique synthesizer. So I fully can recommend to you to check out this device. If you are a beginner, perhaps you need some extra gear, but therefore it's also nice for beginners. You just get this synthesizer and then, for example, a cheap pocket operator, and you instantly can learn about syncing. You have a drum computer and a synthesizer to sequence, but also for other people who like the way to work mobile with synthesizers. For example, the OPZ is a perfect companion. You plug the audio into it and the MIDI clock, and you have some extra great sounding engines, especially as the engines at the moment, the OPZ, are okay, but not so great. So you need some addition. The ELZ1 is a perfect addition. So as I said before, it is a really unique instrument. A lot of people compare it to the OP1, but as you have seen now in this tutorial, it is really our own synthesizer having a total different focus and approach than the OP1. Actually, I even think it makes sense to work with them both together, having an OP1 and a ELZ1, because then you have the tape in the OP1 and the sequencer in the ELZ1. So it's an interesting setting, and they sound total different. So it's actually a great addition to each other. So when you're into mobile synthesizers, I think this is a must-have, and I fully recommend to you to check it out at some of the stores where it's available. And so much about this tutorial. I thank you a lot for watching it. If you liked it, just give me a thumb up. And also, of course, you can follow my channel. I have a lot of tutorials on various machines in preparation, something about the new modal craft synth, and also about the Soma laboratory synthesizers from Russia, like the Pipe and the Lyra 8. So just check out my channel and watch out for some other great sound creating devices. Have a nice day. Bye.